my pleasure to introduce Marina Krenz, who is going to moderate this panel on the PowerPuff Girls of Information Sharing, joining the forces to protect the universe. I'm really looking forward. We just had a super interesting chat. So, hearty welcome. Marina, you take over. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
We're so fancy.
Good afternoon.
We're fancy now.
My name is Marina Krenz. I'm a technical director of REN-ISAC, which stands for Research and Education Networks, Information Security, Information Sharing and Analysis Center. By the way, who is in the audience is part of ISACs or have heard about ISACs?
Wow.
That's pretty good. I like that. I like that.
Good job.
I guess I'm not going to go into introductions what ISACs are. So today we're going to have a discussion. So we have several leaders here from ISACs, and they will share their journeys as accomplished female leaders of successful organizations. And we'll start with introductions. So introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your ISAC, about yourself, and how you become an engineer, firefighter, mountain climber, grandmother of 5, and mother of wonder twins, respectively. Denise, you want? Yeah, sure.
Okay. Bridgette Walsh. I am with the Financial Services Information Sharing Analysis Center, so the FS-ISAC. And I recently started with them, though I guess it's not that recent. It's almost been 2 years. And before that, I was with CISA and all of its predecessors since the beginning of the Department of Homeland Security when it was created 20 years ago. I am a wonder mom of twins. That's one of my special skills, which is definitely a skill, having more than one child at the exact same time and trying to keep them all alive and trying to then be a working mom in the craziness of DHS and cyber, which there's always something blowing up, it felt like, every day. And then I also have an older, they're now 8.5, so I've started to survive that beginning time. And then I have an older son as well, who's a couple years older. So my journey is, I actually really appreciated the several sessions that we had, especially our keynote as well this morning, because I loved the term that Dr. Nina said about being feral. I thought that was a perfect descriptor. I was like, I completely fell into cyber before we even nationally were learning how to spell cyber. No one even knew what it really was. And I, in the beginning of DHS, was pulled into, hey, you're a warm body and you look like you can talk to people, like we need your help. And so I was asked to be a part of the cyber exercise team that was told to create what is now Cyberstorm. So I helped create that and then ran several of them as well. So my journey kind of took me all through leading cyber exercises, then going into cyber strategy, cyber policy, and other national level efforts with the government, with the US government, and working with our international allies, as well as organizations like FIRST. And of course, all of the ISACs. And so then when I was leaving government, it actually, I think, is pretty fitting that I then ended up working for now an ISAC because we were such big proponents of, I think, a lot of the good work that the ISACs really do in helping collaborate with their members, et cetera, which we'll all talk about on our side as well. So yes, I felt like I really attributed that, like that term, I was feral, because I was like, that's exactly a descriptor of how it all happened.
Hey everybody, I'm Suzie Squier. I am the president of the Retail and Hospitality ISAC. So we represent hotels, retailers, gaming casinos, travel companies, basically all consumer-facing kind of organizations. And I had the privilege, in 2014, when our industry was hit with a couple of massive incidents, as everyone may remember. I was working for a retail trade association at the time, and we realized we had to do something about this. And so we gathered 30 CISOs at the time from the largest retailers in the country. It was actually in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was, and Carnegie Mellon was part of the group that we spoke to and spoke with us. And we learned about this ISAC model and we put it together. So I built it in 2014 with the group, got it flying on its own, and then in 2017, the board asked me to come back. I'm not flattering myself that they thought I'd do an awesome job. I think I was just the least, they already knew me, so it's like, let's just get her on board. She's already here, So I came back on board in 2017, and it's great. I love it. It's a fun organization. It's fun to do. Fun working with fabulous colleagues like this. I was an English major, so in college, comparative mythology, so really tied into information security, as you can imagine. But I don't know if anyone was at the last panel or if some of those panelists were here, and I know one was an English major as well. It just goes to show that you're an English major too?
I didn't know that about you. Didn't know I'm English.
High five there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can lead anywhere you want to go, no matter where you start off, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, you can leave. What about the grandmother piece?
I am a grandmother of 5. I have a cohort of 2020. I had 2 boys born that year, 6 weeks apart, and then I have a 2022 cohort. I had 3 born one in October, 1 in November, and 1 on Christmas Day. So my my children tend to go in phases. So I'm hoping that's it for right now. We can hold it at 5 for a while. It's a little overwhelming, but we love them, so it's a lot of fun.
Great. Well, I'm Denise Anderson. I'm President and CEO of the Health ISAC. I actually also came originally from the Financial Services ISAC. And I'll talk about my firefighter climber experience first. So I basically I always wanted to climb. So that was just my passion. I wanted to go climb mountains. And so I started, my first mountain I climbed was in Seattle, was Mount Baker, and then I've climbed all over the world. And I was in these really remote places, and I was like, wow, if something happens to us from a medical perspective, what do we do? So I said, it'd be good to get an EMT kind of certification or something. So, and I've always loved medicine. I started out in medicine in college. And so I said, I'm going to do this. Well, I was going to sign up for a college course to get the accreditation, and actually that very week, a pamphlet came in the mail to my house from the local fire department saying, hey, we'll train you for free if you join us as a volunteer. So I said, oh, okay, I'll do that. So I became an EMT firefighter. I was the first female engine fire driver, fire engine driver in my station, and probably limited in the county, actually. I was also an EMT evaluator for the state, and I also taught fire and EMT at the Fairfax Academy in Virginia. So that was that. But actually the training was really good, and I've done some speeches on some of this before, the incident command system and how it can tie into cyber response. And so definitely came into it. That really helped me in my background coming into the ISAC world. I was an English major. I was in college and I needed money, right? So I applied this was back in the day, I'm kind of dating myself a little bit, but they had index cards posted to the bulletin board about jobs that you could go to. And there was one for a file clerk at a medical clinic down the road. So I'm like, okay, do that, some money. I ended up running the facility, so it was a 21 physician practice. I wanted to be a doctor, but a doctor talked me out of being a doctor and told me to go into business, so that's what I did. I came out to the East Coast and got my master's, my MBA, and then while I was getting my MBA, I of course needed money, so I worked for a magazine as an English major as an accountant. Go figure that one out. So I then kind of graduated, but one of the things I did that was interesting, and it ties into information sharing, is that I worked in credit and collections for first U.S. News and World Report and then USA Today. And we met every month with all the other media across pretty much the country, but locally we would have monthly meetings. And we would share information with each other about the debtors that were out there and the fraud, because there was a lot of fraud going on in advertising, especially in the classified world. And so that whole regime of sharing information with each other and building relationships and everyone helping each other out I learned that from that time period. And so that's how I then fast forward, I ended up getting involved in the ISAC world. The person that hired me at FS-ISAC liked my background in credit and collections, the sharing that I did, and also the incident response and emergency crisis management background I came to the table with. So that's kind of how that happened for me.
Thanks, Denise. Hey, everyone, I'm Faye Francy. I'm the Executive Director for the Auto-ISAC. And I got into this field really because of Denise. Actually, I met Denise back in 2010, I think it was. It was when I was still at the Boeing company. And having been through 9/11, we were concerned about information sharing. And I was worried about a cyber 9/11. And so as we looked at our strategy internal to the company, we decided that while we had to do what we needed to do internally from an engineering and R&D perspective, we recognized the need to be able to share information. We learned it the hard way, and that was 9/11. We know that there was a lot of information out there that had it perhaps been shared across the different agencies, we may have just stopped that. We don't know, but we may have. And recognizing the need of that information sharing, we decided to look into what these things that were called ISACs. And so I got to meet Denise, and she is my mentor and esteemed colleague and someone I truly admire, really helped give unselfishly to the aviation community and to help us build our ISAC. And so I built it from scratch with her good guidance and Bill Nelson as well, and the National Council of ISACs and the team that come together every month to do and share and do the right thing by all of our communities. So it's been a great journey. I've learned a lot. I retired from Boeing, and Denise said to me, hey, Faye, there's this funny group called Automotive. A bunch of the car guys are in town, and they need some help, and it's time for you to pay it forward. So I was hoping I was going to get a nice, cushy job as a consultant, and I've been working 18 hours ever since. So much for that cushy job. Almost 7 years now I've been on the automotive side. We're still working on it, and we are still maturing. But it's been a great journey together to understand the dynamics and how to build out an information sharing center. Not an easy task, but it's great to be here today.
You need to talk about your background.
Oh, my background. So yes, so I started out as a forensic chemist, believe it or not. My first job was at the Maryland State Police, where I did, believe it or not, drugs, arson, and bomb detection. So I started to look at bombs, and there were, at that time, there was some bombs that were going off in airplanes around the world, and so we had to learn how to do that bomb detection, and I learned an awful lot. Met some really great people in the FAA and the State Department, and they wound up doing an anti-terrorism assistance program around bomb detection and how we could mitigate a bomb blast on an aircraft. So I've been involved in physical security for a while since my early career. Fascinating activity. And I continued to learn. Ultimately, I wound up going from forensic chemistry to saying, this is the dark side. How do we get over to the prevent side, right? So prevention being a bomb blanket to mitigate that blast. But even going further than that and really looking at the whole system of systems and understanding that, and that got me into sort of the engineering side. And so I wound up becoming an engineer at the Boeing company and working on air traffic management and examining how to make it more efficient and effective, ultimately resulting in me working in R&D in the Boeing company and working on network systems, embedded systems, if you will, and information assurance. And so the defense side of Boeing did a lot of work in network security. And the commercial guys did nothing, right? They had no security on any of the networks. Everything was wide open. They were trying to build a secure stack, and they couldn't even get there, communication stack. And so ultimately, in fact, I used to come up to ICAO here, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, to build a secure network for aviation across the globe. I don't know they actually ever got that standard passed, but at any rate, ultimately that's been my background, and that brought me over to understanding sort of some of the reasons why we wanted to secure the networks. and ultimately to build out a strategy in Boeing for securing the aircraft. And ultimately that led to building the ISAC. So that's the background. Thanks.
So I'm going to combine the next couple of questions because we already covered some of the stuff. So do you have a physical or cybersecurity background, and how did you get to become a leader within an ISAC world? I keep putting REN-ISAC because I've been, I guess, on the repeat. But how did you get to become a leader within an ISAC world?
I mean, I'll start. I mean, I was a poli-sci major, so I was not anywhere close to being in cyber. Again, we weren't even like talking about cyber. My university that I went to in the US, they just created an integrated science and technology department and college, if you will, within the university my freshman year. But again, I mean, I think a lot of what we talked about, we heard from earlier this morning, that was definitely not on my radar to apply to and go into that line of work or line of study to then eventually go into that line of work. But anyway, so I became a consultant and government consultant because that's a good way to work on your government skills. You're always doing something for the government. And then 9/11 happened. And then one of my clients was one of the 23 pieces that was pulled together into the Department of Homeland Security. It was pulled out of Department of Defense in the US and put into this new department. And again, it was all hands on deck. And so I think I look back to some of those early days, but even now, and how that has shaped me as a leader. And I think honestly what I bring to now the ISAC is, we talked about, somebody else said it earlier about, somebody asked a question about soft skills, and I have now learned those are not soft skills, those are strategic skills. And it is what you bring to the table to being able to parlay and communicate effectively. And honestly, one of the big roles that I served in all my years at the Department of Homeland Security, ending up with, now it's called CISA, is I was one of the big translators and negotiators for all kinds of things that we did. I mean, that's truly what it ended up being, that I would work with our CERT folks and our incident responders and threat hunters, and they would be like, this is blowing up, and they would spout out a bunch of whole technical gobbledygook, and I'm like, nobody understands what that means. That I can't take that to the White House, I can't take that to our cabinet secretary, I don't know what that means. So tell me what exactly is gonna blow up? What is the impact? How far reaching is it? Things like that. And who are the partners you're talking with, in categories? Are you talking with other incident responders in FIRST or our international allies or the government, et cetera? And then they would just keep talking, and then I would translate that, and then I would take it into our leadership chain or to the White House and to the interagency cabinet, et cetera. And obviously to the ISACs, been okay, well, we need to go to the ISACs and we need to talk about what we're seeing or things like that and get their input. Are they seeing it out in the critical infrastructure sectors, et cetera? So I think it's those strategic skills that, for me, I think, again, parlaying that, and being a translator, I think also being a good collaborator, and that has helped me at least grow into my career, and then now be leading up our strategic partnerships in the ISAC, as well as being our executive director on our Sector Coordinating Council, which is the national policy arm. So we kind of see the ISACs as the operational arm of the critical infrastructure sectors, and our Sector Coordinating Councils as kind of the policy arm. I specifically get to sit in both, do some of the operational stuff, but also some of the policy stuff as well. So, and that was all just from randomly just being there at the right time, and not saying no, I guess, when somebody,
Yep.
when somebody was like, I need you to go run and do this and get it done within 30 days or 60 days or whatever it was, and be like, okay, and you just kind of figured it out, so.
Can I jump in, just coming from the other side of it, right, the private sector side? So I've known Bridgette a long time. Bridgette was the person we knew we could go to from the private sector side to understand and hear us and plead our case when we felt like we weren't being listened to. So that was an amazing skill and something that the private sector really valued. So kudos on you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and talking about jumping in and not saying no to all the young folks out there, specifically the young women. You know, we tend to not, it's never been a problem of mine, unfortunately, but I grew up with 4 older brothers, so it's a little, I was kind of used to being pushed into situations. When I was at the trade association and 2014 happened, I was working with chief information officers as a council of our trade association, and we said, you know, we need to bring in this title called, you know, information security officers. So as I always like to say, I was the last one who didn't step back fast enough when they asked who wanted to run it, and I turned around, I was like, oh, I guess I'm in. Okay, that sounds good. So it was just really learning. You know, one thing that I would share is don't be afraid if you don't know what the heck you're doing. There are people out there that you reach out to who help you, and I learned as I went along. The men and women that I pulled together were awesome, and they, of course, they didn't know how to build an ISAC, so we're all kind of in this together. But they ran organizations, and you know, I just kept plodding along, looking for help, collaborating where I could, admitting what I didn't know. I mean, I've always admitted that, you know, I'm an English major. Keep it this deep. You know, don't go too deep on me, but you learn, and you don't really know that you're becoming a leader. You just sometimes just grow into it, and then you look around and you're like, oh, okay, I built an organization. I guess I'm leading it now. So just one thing I would just advocate is to jump in at an opportunity, even if you're afraid that you're going to fail at it, because failings are learning as well, and just the amount of people that are out there that help you is incredible. All you have to do is kind of ask and reach out for it.
I just want to jump in on that. Failure is important, right? So one of the things we used to do in Phantom Works when I ran the group there in Network Systems is we had a Red Phantom Award. And the Red Phantom was for the group that tried the hardest but still failed. And the reason for that, it's kind of like I use the analogy of baseball, Babe Ruth. You know, he was the home run king. Everybody knows that. He was also the strikeout king. So you're not going to hit the home run unless you're really swinging the bat. And sometimes you fail. And guess what? Most times you learn more when you fail. So it's a great point.
I was going to pull on the thread about the English major, so I'm going to come back to that. Because I think if you can break down Chaucer, you can break down anything.
Oh, that was my study. So.
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, I think, you know, and there was conversations earlier in the earlier sessions around skills, as Bridgette mentioned, but doesn't necessarily, we can teach technical, right? It's more the skills, like a journalist. I wanted to be a writer. You know, putting pieces together, thinking about situations that may happen. You know, for example, and I talk about this quite a bit, but when the US and Europe talked about sending tanks into Ukraine, whoever thought that hospitals would be impacted by that? But they were. And so it's like we had the KillNet hacktivist attacks against hospitals. And of course, they were DDoS attacks and weren't big, you know, necessarily a big deal in the grand scheme of things. But guess what? A lot of hospitals didn't have DDoS mitigation in place. So that was an issue for them for a period of time. So, you know, it's not necessarily having that technical, you know, and English is a great, great major, I have to just say, because being able, going back to Bridgette's point on communication, being able to communicate effectively, whether it's through speech or through writing, is so critical. You know, being able to convey your point, being able to convey your thoughts, and being able to synthesize and use logic is so important in what we do every day. And it doesn't matter what job you're in, you can apply it to anything. And like I said, I think the technical piece can be taught, but the other skills are harder to come by.
Okay, so did you have any mentors who helped your career, and what is a good piece of advice that you have received along the way?
I could start. I'll never forget when I walked into RELA. The woman I was interviewing with was, a tall woman like myself. She was a little shorter than I was, but tall. And then I met the president of the organization, who was 6 feet tall. And I was like, this is a place where I could work. So it was an awesome place for, a young woman to, and we used to kid as we continued to build that organization that we had a guy's glass ceiling. The guys would come in like, is there any room for us in here? And like, sure, yeah, you can come on and participate with us. Sandy Kennedy, the president of that organization, was just a huge mentor. She was tough. She was smart. She held you accountable. She didn't mess around, but she had fun, and she loved her staff, and she pitched in, and I learned that, and I do it to this day. On any grunt work that had to be done, she was there doing it, because we didn't have, we were a small organization, and so when you had to do something, she was there. And when we have something to do, unless it's identifying malware, they don't want me in there on that. But, I'm in there as well. And she was a great servant leader, and I learned a ton from her.
I was very fortunate when I was at DHS, up until a year and a half ago, we had 2 cabinet secretaries who, out of 5, that were female, which was almost unheard of when you looked at the cabinet of the US government, to have that many in that kind of short amount of time. And I had a variety of different senior executives that were women. Again, very not common, I would say, across the government and honestly, and just in an industry at large. I will say though, I was thinking about it during, I thought about it a lot during COVID, but I also was reminded myself about it when there were other questions going on in the earlier sessions. Ironically though, there was only one of them out of all of the female executives that I basically worked for. There was 2, I'm sorry, that had kids, or had kids that were like still at home. Everybody else either did not have kids or perhaps weren't even married, or their kids were out of the house. And I go back to, I worked personally for Chris Krebs, who was the first director for CISA, fired by tweet, as he likes to say, which is really true. That's what happened. And I told him, I was his senior counselor for cyber, and then I was also a chief of staff for the cybersecurity division for CISA. And I told him many, many times during COVID that he was the perfect leader at that time for CISA because of COVID, because he has 5 children, and they range in ages of, at the time, I think it was like 10 to like 3 to 10 or so, maybe ages 4 to 10. They were kind of all back to back. And we'd had, as everybody did, we were thrown into working from home and trying to figure out, Zoom and Teams and how do we do all this remotely and when can we safely come in and, all these kinds of things, and homeschooling our children and trying to run an entire security organization for the US government. And there were so many times that he would go off camera. There were so many times, especially his youngest one, Jack, would be on camera because he was like having a meltdown and he wanted daddy. And so he would just pick him up and we would keep going as like the entire senior staff of CISA. And I think, and I told him this then, and this goes to kind of a good piece of advice that I was gonna say. I told him multiple times then, I was like, again, you were the right leader at the right time, because he understood exactly what we were all going through as working parents, like being shut in and having to homeschool and do all these things all at the same time while working. And he empathized. He was taking senior leader calls like from the car and whatever it might be. And I think to the piece of advice that someone gave me, which was modeled then, and I try and like remember that too, is be the leader that you want, or exemplify the leadership qualities and things like diversity and equity qualities and best practices that you want your team and your organization to follow and to amplify. And that goes all the way through things like don't send emails at midnight, because that's going to make your staff think that they need to be up checking emails and doing things like that. Delay send those. You can do it at midnight, which I do emails at midnight all the time, because that's like when it's quiet in my house and I've done all the other things in my life that I need to like take care of after my kids have come home, and then I like get back online and I'll do it. But then as a leader, I delay send them for like 8 in the morning or 9 in the morning. But I've done it knowing that I'm not going to be able to do it at 8 in the morning because my kids are trying to like get ready for school. And take vacation and not check your phone all the time and not be in meetings all the time when you're supposed to be on vacation. It's like those little things of displaying the behaviors as a leader that you want your staff to actually do, and take advantage of those. If you're saying like we're flexible and we want this type of opportunities for our staff, then you need to actually demonstrate that as a leader, I think, yourself. So.
That one, sorry. I just sent an email out last night at midnight and I didn't delay it. Anyway, when I think about mentors in my life, I've had situations where people have plucked me and put me into other situations that have given me opportunities. I mean, I do have one, and actually they're all men, so not really female. But one of them was, first was the fact that when I was working in that medical facility as a file clerk, I ended up going into, again, dating myself, we computerized the clinic and we started doing computerized billing. And so they took me and they trained me on how to computerize all of the various clinics that we had across Southern California. And so I actually became a train-the-trainer type of person. I did that. And then they eventually also plucked me and made me become the manager of that particular facility. So that was one opportunity. But another one was when I got, the opportunity was, I remember this person reached out to me. I belonged to a credit and collection association. I was just a member there. And he plucked me and says, I think you would be great for the board. I would like you to run for election to be an officer, and I did. And that changed the course of my career, actually, because I got a lot of association experience that I carry through now today to my ISAC experience. But the third one was when I was at the FS-ISAC, and I had one of our members approach me and said, we really want you to be one of the representatives for finance, for intelligence, sit on the NCIC floor. And so I did that, and that started another journey for me. So I think there's been several opportunities where people have looked at me and plucked me out of where I was and put me into another opportunity that has actually changed the trajectory, can I say that word, of my career, and that's been pretty amazing.
Yeah. I think mentors are absolutely amazing, and also mentees, right? So I've been on both sides, and I can say that the experience on both sides are very rewarding. Mentors really give unselfishly of themselves, and they really want to see you do well. And it is amazing. I've had many, even from my school years all the way through, even recently. And I've also had people that worked for me that mentored me. So how did I learn a lot about cyber was through my information assurance PhD that worked for me, who built information assurance designs on the defense side. He was in the R&D side, but he worked for me because of the R&D setup. And I really knew very little about the dynamics of what he did. And he taught me. I mean, he really taught me to understand those dynamics, and it was amazing. But one of my greatest mentors actually came out of the FAA. And I worked there because of these bomb blasts. And I was developing some material to support understanding on what to do in the event of a bomb blast or of a bomb threat. And he had started his own company. He retired from the FAA and became the owner of a company called Aviation Security. And that was to address bombs, because that's what we were getting, and hijackings. And he was such a great mentor to me that over the years, and I worked with him on these training classes, and we did them here in Montreal for ICAO, he eventually said to me, you know what? You are a real leader. I'm going to give you my company. Can you imagine someone giving you their company? I mean, what an incredible experience. And I said, I can't do that. I don't know how to run a business. I don't know about accounting. I never learned it. Don't worry about it. We'll get you the right people. And he taught me how you can be in almost any situation, learn from it, and grow and succeed. So thank you to the mentors out there.
Well, I think that's a good point too, Faye, just about pointing out, and I think honestly, I feel like we do this pretty well as, just as ISACs, as organizations. Like we're not the experts. Right. Our members, the firms of whatever sector that we are helping represent, and be their voice, whether it be to the government or anonymize what they're seeing, and see trends and then communicate that around, communicate that with each other, et cetera. But I think a big piece of it is not having to be the expert. You don't need to be the expert in all of the things. And actually, I think one of those strategic skills can be finding the right folks to surround yourself and be like, I know that I'm not the malware person, or I know that I don't have this skill, et cetera. So let me find and align myself with somebody who does, and we can partner together. And I think again, ISACs do that very well just naturally, just because of the mission of what we're doing to represent an entire sector, and with that membership. Some of our ISACs are larger than others, some are smaller, some are more mature, et cetera. But I think then also coming together, even as ISACs themselves, I mean, it's pretty amazing. We've got 5 of us up here, like 5 women up here, but there's a whole bunch of ISACs, that have varying different levels of leadership, et cetera, across all different sectors, and we're all working together too, so.
So a lot of people would agree the journey through leadership is not without its challenges. So what were some of the challenges that you faced? Where some that stand out in particular, and how did you overcome them?
Start with Faye.
I mean, I would say for me, it goes back to being a working mom. It was hard, and it was a hard place to work at in DHS, not because they were like anti-working parents or anything like that. It's just the higher that I got, and the more responsibility and the more leadership titles, et cetera, I got, the more you were just constantly having to be on and around and doing a million things. COVID has changed it a little bit, but at least having accessibility. And that was a really hard, I think, just situation of, especially after I had my twins, and just trying to manage it. And I appreciate the question that somebody gave, or somebody asked earlier about, you do ask women, how do you do it all? How are you a working mom? How are you handling all this? And you do not ask men this. I don't know how many CEO, interviews I've seen and read, especially even in the financial sector, which is predominantly white men. And nobody asks them about so how did you feel about missing all those things, while your kids were growing up? And how was your wife, did you have a wife that was taking care of everything? Nobody asked them that. They're like, what did you learn in business school? Or what is your success stories? Or, things like that. But I will say that in female leadership articles, a lot of times it is asked, how do you balance that? How did you navigate that in your world? And I think, I'm not saying I fully fixed it, but I also do look back. I look back at myself and I'm I did not apply for certain opportunities because of being a mom and my family situation. And I look at the folks who did, and I'm damn, I was better than them, and I should have done it. And they got it, and I could run circles around that person. but they're the ones who put in for it. Like, they're the ones who were like, oh, I'll leave my family for like a month. I'll go off and do this school, or I'll go off and do this. And whereas I second guessed it like multiple times. So I think back to those kinds of pieces of like, I think we need to have more, you need to find a supportive partner, obviously. But I think pushing yourself to be like, we'll make it work, and really trying to go for some of those opportunities that are going to stretch you and enrich your skills, or enrich your leadership courses, or whatever it might be, just to be able to kind of put yourself out there and then figure it out afterwards, like after you get in. Don't like shortchange yourself before you even applied.
Faye, do you want to go next?
Well, okay.
You keep going last, so I'll let you.
Oh, all right, thanks. So there's a lot of challenges in life, right? We all see the hurdles. Sometimes they're high, sometimes they're low. I think, overall, as you go through life, you learn how to address any problem, right? And get back up and just keep on moving. I think that's the most important thing, right? Keep your eye on where you're heading and what you need to do. I will say this, that one of the hardest things I've done is run a nonprofit and information sharing. So I want to talk a little bit about information sharing, because it is really hard to do. The bad guys do it extraordinarily well, right? They share, they don't have lawyers, they don't have policy directors, they don't have any hurdles, right? They don't have any of that, right? No financial issues. And we're over here trying to get through the lawyer who says to their folks, do not share. No, don't tell the ISAC. I know we're part of the ISAC, and it's important because maybe we'll get early information and early warning, and we can do this and we can help the other guy, but we're not going to share. And it is one of the hardest things I think I've ever done in my whole career, and I've done some pretty hard things. It's getting the consensus, bringing the people together to understand the importance and what the value is to sharing. And everybody wants to be the guy on the receiving end, right? They all want to say, oh, okay, I got that mitigation check. Gee, that's too bad that happened. I just learned one last week. 2 of my members sitting around the table, we're talking about our annual summit. Who's going to talk about what? One was hit pretty hard by a ransomware attack. And the other one said, yeah, I had the same attack 3 weeks before, but I didn't tell anybody.
Then the other guy wants to punch him in the face and be like, thanks a lot.
And it's the hardest thing I've ever did. So I even stood up a legal working group, because the lawyers are the ones that stop it. They see it as a risk. Anything outside of the company is a risk if you share. Let's start with the lawyers. And even the lawyers, you get them, we put them through tabletop exercises, they see it, they get it, they're like, wow, if we'd shared earlier, we could have mitigated this. And guess what? The lawyer sitting next to me says, but I'm still not going to share, Faye. What do you do with that? Denise, what do you do with that?
Well, I consider myself an evangelist for information sharing, so I would punch that lawyer in the face. So going back to challenges, I think for me, probably one of my biggest challenges is I became a leader very early in my life. I was still in college, actually. And I don't know if it's a curse or how you look at it, but I kind of am a leader. I was born a leader. I always say that if I were flying a plane, I'd be the pilot and not the stewardess. That's just who I am. It's in my DNA. But so because of that, I got thrown into leadership positions at a very young age, and I felt discriminated against, and maybe it was my own personal internalization of it, but I felt discriminated against for being young in a leadership role. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I struggled with that for a lot in my career, like just thinking that people weren't taking me seriously when I was running organizations. Yeah. And so that was a challenge for me. And I just pushed through it. I'm just PowerPuff girl.
And you got older. And you got older,
and I got older, too. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. To remind me of that. Yeah. But, Buttercup, if you know, was, she's aggressive and she pushes through everything. And I think I am Buttercup.
You got to push through.
I just push through. I don't let anyone tell me no. I find a way to work around it.
Never give up, right?
That's right.
Never give up.
Never give up. Never, what is it?
Give in.
Give in.
Never give in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Denise,
I just had a really interesting, mine's a little interesting story, and anybody in the military out there may appreciate that. I did not serve. I have a number of members in my family who did. So when I was building the organization, I had someone, we tried to gather all these other trade associations in our industry. You know, this couldn't be just one trade association, it had to be, you know, holistic. And we had one folk working with us, but then also building a competing information sharing entity at the same time. And that was a lot of stress because you're trying to you kind of put on yourself that you're trying to help a sector, and then you've got this going on. So I called my brother, who is now a retired 3-star general from the Special Forces, landed the ground forces after 9/11 as a colonel in Afghanistan. Look him up, John Mulholland, badass. So he was home one time, and I was stressing going to work, thinking about this, like, how do I deal with this? And I was like, oh my God, I've got this guy who's fighting bad guys all the time. I'm like, why don't I just call him? So I called my brother up, and I called him on his personal line, which we really usually don't do, and he goes, Suze, what are you doing? You're calling me on my line. I'm like, I got an important question. How do I beat this, how do I beat this? And he said, well, have you gone through legal? You know, I was like, no, done what? Have you done this? Have you done that? He was walking through kind of his military strategy of what he, of course, taking it out of military context. I said, yeah, no, and he goes, you know what you have to do? I go, what? And he goes, you got to build a better mousetrap. He goes, you just got to keep focused on what you're going to do, and focus on you, your team, your mission, and knock it out. You can't let that distract you. And I tell that to my staff all the time. This has gone away now, thank goodness, but because we beat them. We built a better mousetrap. We did it. But I tell them, like, you got to focus on our mission, our members, do what they want us to do, what we're supposed to do, and you really can't get too distracted about these objects that are going on out there. And I'm sure all of you in your life, in the world that you live in, probably have that come up all the time. And it was a lesson I learned that I still have to kind of course correct myself, but it was a very important lesson for me to learn that you really just got to stay the course. So.
I have a mantra, because I kept preaching that to somebody that was so worried about what other people were doing, is do what you do and do it well, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So we would like to pause and ask if anybody has any questions. Like to ask this.
Uh-oh.
Oh, boy, a couple getting up.
It's the auto-ISAC, guys.
Woohoo!
Auto.
It could be the lawyers.
Everybody loves auto.
No, Cam's not a lawyer. Cam's the man.
Thank you. I am not a lawyer. I would never claim to be one, even if I was. I guess my question comes down to a couple of things. So, first of all, I think ISACs are super, super valuable. You know, we get a ton out of our auto ISAC, and I'm sure your members get a lot out of it too. But like any organization, kind of like what you get out of it is what you put into it.
Yep.
How do you guys tackle the struggles of, we've all been there where there's like an ISAC call and it's like the same 5 people talking all the time. What do you do to like stir the pot to get participation going?
Well, I do a couple of things. I make it a point, and I've told my staff who work with these groups to reach out to the other folks who aren't talking individually and get to know them and find like one little nugget you can about that person, about what they're doing, whatever the topic may be. And then just, unless there's someone you really know just doesn't want to do it, personality-wise, then you get that. But then I just say, look, I'm going to call on you to share that. It's just one line. That's all you have to do. You just got to break the silence. And the other thing we always do is, always tell, and I deal with a lot with our CISOs, and we go around the room, we introduce ourselves, a name. I don't care how long we've been doing it, we do it every time. And I said, every one of you have broken the silence barrier, so every one of you can speak. You've heard your voice, we've all heard it, it's great. But I think just trying to find an angle where you can get that one person. We do some fun competitive sharing challenges. We're, again, teams and analysts. So I started that when I first started. I was really nervous to put names out there about the top sharers. And not the bottom, but just the top sharers. And I thought, this is really going to probably bite me in the butt. But they loved it. Mm-hmm. They're like, I want Suzie to know that I shared that so that I get on her list and stuff like that. So that's been positive. And I think there's some folks just, you know, that you just know you're not gonna, that, at least in my experience.
Yeah, and you know, that's okay. You accept that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are always going to be lurkers, to your
Lurkers.
point. And that's okay. They're learning from everybody else. And you know, at some point, I guarantee you they will eventually share.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, part of it is, too, is getting them involved. And so,
Yeah.
like, I had someone pluck me and put me into a situation doing the same thing. Like, our nominating committee, one of the things that we're really trying to get them to do is pluck people from the membership that we would love to see be on the board or be more involved, and then make them more visible to the membership. So, you know, that we'll make them the conference chair, for example, or they're heading up an important committee. And so we'll do things like that where we're, you know, trying to get them more involved, because it is really about feeling comfortable. So that's that trust and that
Yeah.
relationship
Hard to
building.
build.
And that's what we do as ISACs, you know, it's like building that trust community. And so the more we can make people feel comfortable and, you know, feel, hey, this guy shared with me, so maybe I should share back with them, you know, create that environment is really, I think, a key way to do that.
And I
And
think
a
there's
lot
an, oh, I'm sorry, Faye. No, Faye, go ahead.
A lot of times you don't even know that they are really actually sharing with each other. In fact, this story I have to tell is about, I'm gonna just say it, it's like Ford and GM. And they came to me one day, and the Ford guy said, you know, Faye, I would never in a million years ever talk to that guy down the street, right? I would never talk to the GM guy or the Ford guy. And now I feel comfortable to pick up the phone and call him. And I didn't even know that was going on, right? And so that's, sometimes you don't even know what's going on, and you have to just encourage it and hope that they continue that dialogue in a meaningful way, of course, with the bigger group. And the other tactic we use is, you know, the chairs, like, we'll call on people, go around the room and call on people and say, hey, what do you think about that? Joe or Susie, what do you think, right? And get them just talking, and then once they start talking, find something that you can pull them in with and get them engaged on.
I think member-to-member outreach is good too. You know, we
Really
have a
good.
very active Slack channel, and we have analyst-to-analyst calls. So we have new members join. I think it's every other month. We invite the new analysts in, and our you know, not just our internal, but our member analysts. A few will be on there. So a lot of it is trying to get our members, whether it's via a Slack contact or something, to, you know, to build a relationship and let people feel safe and confident that they can, you know, that they can do it. But yeah, there are some folks who just, you're probably not going to get.
We even have a mentor-protege program now, Cam, if you don't know. We have, for our new members that are coming in, we ask one of our older members to mentor them, right? And to spend like the first 6 months with them to help them kind of guide them through what's an ISAC, how does it work, who can I hang out with, who can I talk to? And I'm like, what the heck are they doing? And it's really been very helpful. And so Ford is mentoring Ferrari. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Cam.
Hey, Trey Darley, and it's good to see those of you who I know and those of you who I don't. Thank you for your time and your wisdom and experience. In terms of building trust in an information sharing environment, people like to hoard information, I've observed. And I think that just like when people hoard currency and currency flows slow, then you experience often an economic downturn. And there's a correlation between, you know, how often money is changing hands and how healthy the economy is, right? In the same way, I think it's true of trust and information sharing that if I'm GM and I want the Ford person to tell me about their ransomware, the best thing I can do is at least tell them about the spam I got, you know? So in putting on my sort of old standards hat, and like Denise and I have worked together way back in the FS-ISAC days, I think, there's always been this problem of how to get past the lawyers, but when we designed this whole sort of sightings ecosystem, at least at the structural level and the standards, the idea was like, okay, the Ford guy publishes a indicator. This is like evil.com. And then, you know, like at least on the other side, you can do a +1. And then later you can say, I matched on www.evil.com on this timestamp. And that you could sort of like tiptoe up to, you know, helping your organization sort of get there and also building trust in the community. Has this manifested in any way, or is this still a pipe dream?
No, it works. Yeah, it does.
Slow.
Yeah, it's slow, but we have folks who just add on, and that's what they're comfortable with doing. And that's fine. It adds another piece of information, piece to the puzzle. I don't know. Our system may work differently than the FS-ISAC, but what we did learn is we started, if they wanted to, because they could do it without attribution as well, is we kind of turned on the ability for them to get that attributable too, if they wanted to. And so then they get a little bit more comfortable in, and as you said, in sharing the little bits, and then maybe they can, and then also they reach out to the analysts and say, because some aren't really sure if that's something they should share, It's like, does this, and like, yeah, good, go, or tweak. So I think that works.
We used to do the in-person tabletop exercises every quarter where the analysts would get together, and they started building a relationship, and there's nothing like having a beer together, right? That really builds relationships. And what we found is the ones that used to attend those meetings and those activities in person, they're still the strong core group that continues to lead the ISAC, right? They're the ones that tend to speak up. Because they kind of built that trust, and some of that was around a beer or just going to that shared experience of going to Cyberstorm or doing a tabletop exercise or just being in the same room where somebody's up there very vulnerable and talking about the hit that they just went through and sharing, right? And so we have something called members teaching members. We also have partners teaching members, and that is really powerful. For a member to get up there and say, yep, I was hacked. It's kind of like AA, right? I'm part of the I have been hacked, right? I have had my identity stolen 7 times. And so as you start to see that human side and you start to recognize, boy, it's happened to him, I guess it could happen to me. And it will, right? Sooner or later, it's not if but when. And once you have that camaraderie, and then you can start talking to each other a little bit more about it, and you show that and you showcase it, it really starts to get others to open up. At least that's what I find.
I would say too, it's interesting because, as you were saying, like more information, more equals more, right? So more information or information coming in will equal like more information. I think for us, for our side, we've got the largest banks, but then we've got actually the majority of our membership is small and medium and regional banks. And I would tell you like that part is also a struggle to get them to share. And it's not even about, I think, the trust piece, I think mostly. Resources. I think it's resources. They are overwhelmed like no other. They're the head of HR. I used to like say when I talk to state and locals, like when you were talking about like cybersecurity people that like in these small communities or counties and whatever school systems, all these like areas, you've got like the head of IT and they also do HR and they plan the birthday parties like every Thursday. It's like they're doing like a million things all at the same time. So I think that there's an overwhelming factor. I think there's an element of, and it is a little bit like, what comes first, chicken before the egg, catch-22 kind of deal of like, is this worthy of sharing? Yeah. Is this stupid? Like, I don't want to like put it out there and then everyone's like, that's dumb. Like, not even that it's dumb that it's happening to you, but it's like, that's insignificant. You've just like wasted my 3 seconds that I read that, things like, so I think there's a little second guessing from especially the smaller folks. The bigger folks, I will say one of the fortunate things, unfortunate perhaps, on our side in the financial sector with the big banks, one, they have been nation state attacked, like DDoS attacks and hacked and all kinds of other things. So they know that they've gotten past the deal of like, it's not an if, it's like a when, it's already happened. And so over the last, I'd say 20 years, and Denise was, a part of that for a really long time, they've gone through a bunch of these big events like together, and I think that there is a lot more level of trust amongst them to share. But also, what I keep trying to like also keep focusing on is you have a national responsibility as a leader in this sector to help share information that could potentially help other sectors, but also the small, medium, and regional banks, et cetera, in our sector, which is not insignificant if banks go down, as we saw, with Signature Valley Bank and others being taken over by the government and then having to be bought, So I think there's not an easy answer, but I think it's events like this, it's events like us having our own summits, getting people to see each other and be like, okay, and then start to feel and hear other stories of people presenting at our own sector summits and things like that about oh, that did happen to me. And maybe they'll think, maybe I should have shared that because that was a little piece that they didn't know, so.
Hi, thank you again for your time. Can you share any more tactical tips about educating lawyers from some of these companies? The TTX one was particularly helpful, something I personally hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
So anything more like that would be great. Thank you.
The other, you want me to jump? Or you go?
I was just one real quick. The other thing we did is, Target was obviously, the main news in 2014, and they're our champion. And they've done videos with their legal team, with their comm teams, webinars that go through, and their chief analysts, if anyone knows Kyle Davis, you may have the button, not really sure. But they've gone out to our members, and we invite the lawyers to that call. Not everyone comes, but we record it. As if I just pushed it on our CISO listserv just the other day, again, and they really walk through steps on, and we've made templates so that you can go to your legal team and say, look, there's no personally identifiable information, there's nothing attributable to us, and if you can get sign off on that template and use that, then it's okay, you can only share what fits here. Anything above that, you gotta come back to the legal team. So there's those little steps that have worked for us.
I'm gonna be doing a panel next week on incident response. And one of the things that one of the questions we ask is, do you have your lawyer as part of your exercise team? Are they at the table, answering the questions and hearing—
And incident response team.
Right, hearing the issues that and challenges you have when you're working in an incident. Definitely getting them involved, definitely educating, but I think, it goes back to champions too. We've talked about champions of information sharing, but champions of lawyers. And I remember when I was at the FS-ISAC and we had the DDoS attacks of 2012, 2013, and a very large company, a financial company, was not a member of FS-ISAC but got hit. And I sat for hours on the phone with their lawyer, trying to make their lawyer feel comfortable about them, becoming, and we were trying to help them, right? So we were helping them mitigate against this attack. And so I eventually got him to agree to, open up the sharing and all that. But he actually became a mentor and, an advocate for that company. Ended up joining FS-ISAC, but also, spreading the word around amongst his colleagues about why it's important to share information, especially during an incident, but all the time.
The tabletops help, but the other thing we do is we have a legal working group, and that legal working group meets. They don't meet that often like a regular working group, but they meet once a quarter. And I brought in at the time it was DHS lawyers that would come in and talk about why it's important and the information sharing and how it's protected and it can't be FOIA'd and so forth. And the other thing we've done is I've gotten the lawyers to actually support some of the information sharing standing committee to go in there and say, look, we want to share, you guys aren't letting us share, and listen to the technical guys, talk to these lawyers kind of en masse. And it was fascinating to watch that interaction. And ultimately, what that resulted in was 2 documents that really made a difference. One is called a commitment to information sharing that the standing committee built that said we are committed to sharing. If we're a member, if we're part of the ISAC, we're committed to sharing. And the other one was the lawyer said, well, sometimes there's legal issues in sharing, right, beyond just the risk, but it's a contractual, whether it's the supply chain up or down, there could be contractual obligations that they can't share with the ISAC before they share with those other obligated parties. So what the lawyer did was built something we call a release document so that if both parties agree that they can release it to the ISAC, then they can automatically do it. And it hasn't been used, but they just developed it, they approved it at the board, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that might help.
Hi, Tom Longstaff, Software Engineering Institute. The level of leadership on the stage is amazing. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to ask you about our perceived tension. So before there was the FF-ISAC, we had the FS Roundtable. And the level of trust in the Roundtable was truly amazing. I mean, people would talk about things in the Roundtable meetings that lawyers would never allow you to touch. But there was a strong level of trust there. As we've scaled into ISACs, and as the ISACs get bigger and bigger, this level of personal connection and trust that each one of you have talked about is more and more difficult to maintain. How do you deal with leading an area of information sharing in a world that has to scale beyond individual connection?
One of the things that I'm probably the smallest of you, I'm not really sure, but we're not, we have about 240 member companies, so we're still, growing. And what I'm trying to do now is build those systems in place that will survive as we grow. So one thing is, we do CISO to CISO calls as well. So new CISOs come in, we bring them into the fold by other CISOs. It's like I was saying, the analysts, like try to build these systems in that, because I'm with you. It's something that keeps me up at night, is how do we have a great community. How do we keep it that way? So I try to build these smaller systems that can go on and build it. And then when we have a monthly CISO call, bring that new person in to talk and to bring in, try to get them in the fold and build them into that trust. And then you can't beat in-person meetings. We can't have enough of them. Everyone's got crazy schedules. But man, if I can get them to a CISO-only meeting, or if we can get our analysts to the workshops or the summit, that's when the magic happens, as you well know.
I think also creating special interest groups. Yeah. So I know, like when I was at FS-ISAC, Bill Nelson, when he was president, would talk about concentric circles of trust, and he would build communities within the community. Yeah. We've done it in healthcare too. So we have, obviously healthcare, anyone that touches a patient can qualify to be our member. So we have anything from large pharmaceutical manufacturers to very small clinics as members. And so while they all are in healthcare, they may have different niche interests. And so creating those communities for their sharing level has been very beneficial. I didn't jump in before when Trey asked the question, but I was, I'm a mountain climber, I'm all about adventure, and it is about the adventure. So it's like creating those relationships through the adventure. And if you come to any Health ISAC summit, and if you're in healthcare, we're the summit you want to go to, right? Because we do fun things. We do unique, fun things. It's an adventure together where you're creating that so that when the time comes when an incident happens, you can say, hey, I played volleyball next to you on the beach. What do we do? How do we help each other through this incident? So, and I've got, specific examples of where we've been able to come together as a community and solve a problem. So it is about, you can build the trust. And the other thing too is we do intentionally cap our attendees. So like at our conferences, we will never go above a certain number because we believe in creating that kind of community feel.
Thank you very much. I'm Keir from the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK. Just want to say it's an immensely impressive amount of experience and wisdom on the stage, so thanks for sharing it all with us.
I think the wisdom's I appreciate that. I'm a little nervous y'all thinking it's wisdom, but really appreciate that shout out.
No worries. The question I've got kind of focuses on your respective journeys to get to where you are at the moment. And I'm lucky enough to be kind of in a leadership position in my organisation. And I'm keen that the people that follow me are even better for the organisation and better for the mission than I am. So we want to make sure that we've got the best people coming through. And that there are as representative of the UK as they can be, because we recognise that's how we make our mission as successful as it can be. But as an individual in the UK, I am like box A1 for generic white guy who looks a particular way and sounds a particular way with a particular background, right? And I'm interested in your reflections from starting out in your careers and moving through your careers. And the example of Mr. Krebs is a great great one. We are struggling at the moment with having people in leadership positions that look and sound a particular way to represent particular communities, and recognizing that as important, of being able to see yourself in those positions. But on the other hand, having individuals in those positions who encourage you through their behaviors. So they're not necessarily visually or representative from a background, but set the groundwork so that anyone from any background can flourish because of those behaviors and what they demonstrate. And I'm just interested to hear from your perspective what you have seen to be most useful and most encouraging through your career. Are the people that look and sound like and represent you, or the people that display the behaviors and remove the barriers for you, I guess, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
I think there's a little of both. And I think there's also something Denise said to me, or said earlier, resonated with me, because I feel like I was in the same boat. I was a really hardworking go-getter, and again, like, people would just be like, hey, can you do this? I'd be like, okay, and I would just be helpful. In my way, that's what I was just doing. I was part of the team, and I was given a lot of, whether it was later in life with true on, like, straight out, like, leadership titles, or just really important tasks, and given those opportunities of, like, hey, we need to create a national cyber exercise from the ground up, and you're gonna be on this team to help do that. And I was like, I don't know what a cyber exercise is. I don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, nobody else does either, just go. And I think, so some of it I think is looking for, my point is, some of it is looking for opportunities where you may not have an open position to elevate somebody, but is there something that you can give to either an up-and-comer or somebody who brings a diverse way of thinking, et cetera, and be like, hey, can you be my project lead on that? And because your skill set, I think, would be really, really well aligned with it. And I need you to work with this other office, or be our liaison to this other office, whatever it is. I think that there's a lot of different pieces to our day-to-day work that sometimes I think as leaders, sometimes you just assume all those tasks and all those roles because it's like, that's what you've done, and that's like what the person before you did. They sat on this committee, they did this, et cetera. And I think there's a way from not even just a diversity like perspective, but again, a diversity of activities, even for you as a leader and for staff, to be like, I don't have to be the one that's in every meeting doing all of these things. So I think it's looking for those kinds of things, those opportunities too, which I benefited from a bunch of times, not even understanding that actually was what was happening, was like, I need you to go be the rep to the White House, and you're gonna go lead this task force for the entire interagency. And I was often the junior one who I got asked to like go get coffee and stuff, and I was like, I'm actually leading this task force, thanks, but okay.
I think, if I understand, I think that I tend to gravitate to people who walk the walk versus people who look the walk, if that's what you're getting at. I mean, and I think everybody knows that. You know, not that people aren't doing what they think is the right thing, but I think I'd prefer watching someone and follow someone in my career who I know basically comes down to just being a good person and treating people well and giving opportunities. It really isn't really that much harder than that. And so I mean, I would rather be known as someone who did what you're supposed to do right than I'm the one who's standing up what we are all supposed to follow, is what I would.
And to something that Faye said earlier, it genuinely invested in your success, right? Wanting you to succeed. I see that as a leader. You know, it's my job to support the team below me and to make sure that they succeed and feel good in what they're doing and that they believe in the mission of what we're doing as an organization.
And if it's better for them to do that elsewhere, then so be it.
Yeah.
And we, as you all know, have that. In small companies, someone's going to find a job, and God love you. Go forth and prosper.
I know
and come back maybe someday, who knows?
One of the things we used to do as a Boeing exercise, as we would look at maybe a 50-year strategy, was to say, we have to bring in diversity of thought. Right? So forget skin color and all those external elements. What about in the mind, diversity of thought? what might this person bring in that, gosh, we haven't even thought of, right? Really important. And so you've got that IQ piece and you've got that EI piece, emotional index piece. Very important to look at that, and I think anyone that has a high EI, or emotional index, is really going to be about managing and bringing out the best in people, right? Bringing out that diversity, bringing out what we may miss, right? Very, very important, or what we may not have thought of. So really bringing that diversity of thought, having respect for each other no matter what we look like internally or externally, is, I think, critical to our thinking and to critical thinking.
We have 4 minutes left, so we have time for one more question.
You guys going to battle it out? You're going to battle it
We'll
out?
see. We might be able to answer it
I'm
quickly.
going to
We'll
ask
see.
my question because I think it's a good one, but I'll be quick.
No.
So incident reporting is becoming increasingly the norm in regulated sectors across many different geographies. How do you see this impacting the role and configuration of information sharing communities like ISACs over the coming years? Thank you.
A good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. Thanks, Trey. So I could get up on my soapbox on all the mandatory reporting, and
she has at meetings.
I have. I mean, because I believe that we're treating the victim.
Okay, and we're going to call on you.
Yeah.
We're going to call on you after this anyway.
So anyway, I believe that we shouldn't be focused on mandatory reporting. When I was in FS-ISAC, I had a member that said if you hire 10 people, 9 of them are for compliance, 1 is for incident response. And that's the wrong approach, right?
Yep.
So that's my soapbox in short. But yes, ISACs can play a huge role in that. I think that because we have and this is part of my conversation with government, trying to get them to understand that we have the perspective, we have the anonymity, we can bring that information to them versus individual organizations having to do that. It doesn't scale, number one, but number two, the ISACs can play a critical role in that. And so I do believe we'll have a role. We have to still figure that out.
All answered.
Sure. Thank you for being quick. I appreciate that. A really good question, but I guess my question comes more towards some conversation earlier around sort of like the feral talent development. I think automotive cybersecurity is like 100% feral. I know my team is definitely, Alan and I come from mechanical engineering. Jessie started her career at a dealership, so we all kind of started like in autos and kind of figured out the cybersecurity thing later. And I'm curious, what the mix is like in other areas and kind of like what you have done to encourage your membership to kind of like reduce some of the gatekeeping that's really common in cybersecurity. I mean, I think in the US, it's like a negative 6% unemployment rate in cyber. There's like 700,000 jobs you can't find people to fill. How do you sort of start the conversation of like, yes, you can figure this out. You don't have to be like, hacker man.
We have a lot of conversations in retail and hospitality about it. And all your organizations probably had this. With retail, they started reaching into their stores, and I think they're all talking about unicorn, or you don't need, there's a lot of conversation that you don't need a college degree necessarily. College degrees are great, but not necessarily. And also I think they're all really opening up to going like, this person in the call center does a really awesome job. How about if we migrate him or her here and give other things? So if that's what I do sense, at least with the members in our community, that they are opening up that gate to not requiring, certain things. And whether that's because they've had to, maybe. But I see a lot more fresher approaches to filling positions from folks totally outside of normal information security.
I would say it's a constant learning, and you can learn from your other team members who bring in diversity of thought, different experiences, and learn. In Boeing, we used to really struggle with how do you teach an engineer about cyber? Our engineers even trainable in that. Oh, it's scary.
It's like how many it takes to fill a light bulb.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but you could go either way, as Susie's saying, you know, and so train those skills. And I learn every day. I'm amazed at how much I don't know. The older I get, the less I know. So I think it's a constant
Do you think
learning.
it's getting better? Do you think that gatekeeping is getting better in your world, or do you still see it?
You know, I see problems as, most of the problems we have are people problems. Let's be frank. And so why do we have gatekeepers, and how can we get them to open the gates? I think there's a lot of ways. We talked about building trust is one way, but you know, even understanding that there are gatekeepers, like who the gatekeepers are. Because sometimes you think it's flowing and you don't understand that it may not be. Like, it's amazed me. I've been on a tour in Europe. I mean, and you know what? In the US and in North America, we're a heck of a lot better than they are in other parts of the world with sharing. We've been doing this for a long time. It's harder like I've been in Europe, and it's been a struggle to get organizations to even understand why they should share. And so, but being over there, and we have members over there, they don't understand all the things that they could take advantage of, or don't even know about the ISAC. So that's been part of the education too. So we don't even know that that's going on. So the more we can break those walls down, I think we can get rid of the gatekeeper problem.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think I put you over time. Apologies.
No, we got
That's
a minute
okay.
30. Yeah.
No, that's negative.
Oh, we were in the negative. Sorry. Oh, it's a red light.
Oh, wait, that's more.
English major. If I could leave from the last, there's some folks here in the last session, and one thing I just want to suggest using your ISAC for, especially young folks who want to get out a little bit more, build your brand, I think they talked about. How do you do that? Talking in front of a safe space like an ISAC is the perfect way for you to present and to start working on presenting or working on a panel with somebody or something like that. So if any of you are interested, we love to hear our members tell a story. Yes. You don't have to have the answer to everything, doesn't have to be perfect, but just your story, your journey in your implementation, or how you dealt with an issue, or whatever world you happen to be in within cybersecurity. Just reach out to your ISAC for that, and I guarantee you, and if they don't, call me, because we'll use you anyway, so even if you're not in retail or hospitality, because you're the ones who have, and everybody can learn from everybody else, even if they're the most mature company, and all of our mature companies still participate and listen to other people, because you can always learn from somebody. So just for those of you who like, how do I kind of start, building up and getting the guts to do that? Reach out to your ISAC and suggest it, because it's a great spot to start. So now we're -3.
Oh no,
Now we're really negative. Thank you.